My parents forgot about my wedding because I was getting married before their favorite daughter, but now all the relatives are angry with them and won't attend my sister's wedding. My parents forgot about my wedding because I was getting married before their favorite daughter, but now all the relatives are angry with them and won't attend my sister's wedding. I am 28 years old and got married 8 months ago after being in a relationship for over 5 years. Everyone attended the wedding, except for my parents and my 26-year-old sister. I wasn't surprised my sister didn't attend since we've never gotten along anyway. I extended an invitation to her purely out of courtesy. However, my parents not attending was a shock. It's no secret that my parents have always preferred my sister over me. She has always excelled at practically everything and is definitely more conventionally attractive than I am. I'm short and a bit chubby, while she literally looks like a model. And I'm not exaggerating. In college, she even did some modeling for a while and participated in a few projects, but then she focused on her career and left that behind. She has a business degree and got a job at a big company right after college, quickly climbing the corporate ladder. She's young, beautiful, and successful, and my parents have always been prouder of her than of me. Honestly, I don't blame them for that. She's the daughter they can brag about. In comparison, I'm pretty ordinary. I'm not denying it. I don't have her looks or intelligence. I'm not putting myself down, just being practical. Despite not being as exceptional as her, I'm quite happy with my life. It used to hurt that my parents weren't as proud of me as they were of her, and didn't make an effort to give me the same kind of love and affection. Over time, I just accepted it. It's not like I had any other choice. I tried everything to get my parents to treat me the same since I was a child, but nothing ever really worked. It's as if they were obsessed with my sister, and I was never going to be good enough. So why bother trying to impress people who were never going to see the good in you, and would only compare you to your sister? Over time, I stopped trying and made peace with it. I started living my own life. And I must say my life became much happier after that. Even so, I kept in touch with my parents because I didn't want to create any drama. I knew they were very conscious of appearances. So if I suddenly stopped talking to them and cut them out of my life, they would make a big fuss about it. I didn't think the drama was worth it. So I chose to stay in touch superficially, but otherwise remain distant. They didn't seem to mind much since they had my sister to dote on. That's how things had been for the past few years. Then last year, I got engaged to my long-term boyfriend. Of course, I told my parents all about it. I even invited them, but they didn't show up. It's not like I missed them much at the wedding, but it was still a bit shocking since they hadn't even RSVP'd. A lot of people asked about my parents. No one was surprised my sister didn't show up because they knew we didn't have the best relationship. But my parents not attending was a big deal, especially with no explanation. A couple of days after the wedding, I decided to ask them about it. Even before the wedding, when I noticed they hadn't RSVP'd, I tried contacting them, but they didn't respond. At the time, I thought something was off, but didn't dwell on it because I had a lot on my plate. After the wedding though, I really needed some answers, so I decided to confront my parents once and for all. When I called, they finally picked up, though I thought they were just going to ignore me as they had in the weeks leading up to the wedding. As soon as they answered, they told me how upset they were that they couldn't attend the wedding, and started saying I really should have sent them a formal invitation. Obviously, I was very confused because, as far as I knew, I had invited them. My husband and I had meticulously gone through the guest list multiple times to ensure no one was left out. We sent both physical and electronic invitations, and I knew for a fact that my parents had received one. When they said they felt insulted for not receiving an invitation, I knew something was wrong. While they were telling me how offended they felt, I decided to double-check if I had actually sent the invitation, and sure enough, I had. I knew for a fact they were trying to manipulate me, but I didn't say anything. I just apologized for my mistake in quotes and hung up. Obviously, I was very upset because they were trying to make me believe it was somehow my fault, even though they had decided to miss my wedding on purpose for reasons I didn't even know. After that call, I talked to my husband about what had happened and how my parents had tried to manipulate me. He told me he was pretty sure they were just upset because I was getting married before my sister, which is why they decided not to come to the wedding. They were now trying to make me believe I hadn't invited them to give themselves an excuse. It was actually my husband who made me realize they were genuinely upset about me marrying before my sister. At first, I didn't understand what he meant, but then he pointed out several examples. First, when I called my parents to inform them I was engaged, they didn't seem happy at all. They looked pretty shocked, but I assumed they were just surprised I was informing them. Given we had a rather cold relationship, I called them before posting it on social media because I thought it was my responsibility as their daughter and more polite to give them a heads up. My husband said he immediately noticed they weren't happy. Their expressions weren't those of pleasant surprise. He didn't mention it at the time because he didn't think it was important. It was at the engagement party that he noticed my parents sitting in a corner instead of socializing and looking unhappy. When he tried to talk to them just out of courtesy, He saw that they were on the phone with my sister, and he could hear her crying on the other end while they were consoling her. It doesn't take a genius to figure out why they weren't too thrilled about my engagement. Though my husband couldn't hear what my sister was saying, he could make a pretty good guess. As soon as my parents realized he was nearby, they put their phones aside and started pretending, but it was already too late. I was quite shocked when I found out about these things, but a lot started to make sense. It was only after the wedding that I figured it all out. I'm pretty sure this was the real reason they didn't attend the wedding. There's no way they didn't receive the invitation, especially since I double-checked everything multiple times. After they didn't show up at my wedding, I decided I wasn't going to speak to them anymore, not even to maintain appearances. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, I heard from some relatives that my sister is engaged. Apparently, she has been with this guy for the past year. He proposed, and she said, yes. I'm happy for her. I know my parents are going all out for this wedding because they've been bragging about it online. They've already spoken to some friends and started scouting huge venues, which are going to be quite expensive. My sister has been telling our cousins that she's going to buy her dress from Vera Wang, and I know it's going to be a massive event. I didn't care much, but a few days ago, my parents contacted me. They told me it was very cruel of me to try to ruin my sister's wedding. I had no idea what they were talking about. I told them I didn't care because we hadn't been in touch for a long time, and I wasn't interested in arguing with them now. But they said they knew I had spent the last 8 months since my wedding bad-mouthing my family, and that they were very disappointed in me. They said that every relative they'd spoken to so far had shown absolutely no interest in attending the engagement party. Many had already started coming up with excuses to avoid the wedding. They claimed they were certain I had something to do with this because my sister was very upset that our family wasn't going to her engagement party. She decided to vent to one of our cousins, who told her that, apparently, I had been telling everyone in the family that my parents didn't attend my wedding because they were upset my sister wasn't getting married first. According to my parents, I made it seem like they preferred my sister because she's prettier and more successful. They accused me of making them look bad. Now, because of my supposed accusations, our family was hesitant to attend the engagement party, let alone the wedding. In a way, they were right. After the wedding, there was a phase where whenever my relatives asked me why my parents hadn't attended, I simply told them what I thought. I was very upset with my parents and their behavior. After what my husband told me, I didn't think I needed to stay quiet. Whenever I met a relative at some family event and they asked if I'd finally gotten an answer about why my parents didn't come to my wedding, I told them the truth. In my opinion, I didn't think I was gossiping or doing anything wrong. It was the plain truth. As far as I was concerned, my parents had always been very concerned about appearances, but couldn't be bothered to show up at my wedding. For them, protecting my sister's feelings was more important than anything else. I had learned my lesson. I wasn't going to try with them anymore. After what my husband told me, I decided honesty was the way to go. At the time, I didn't really think about the consequences. I thought people deserved to know the real reason my parents didn't attend the wedding. Besides, I didn't see why I had to lie to the people who asked. What I didn't realize was that the information would spread. At this point, practically the whole family knows. They also know it's because to my parents, my sister is a higher priority. And they also tried to manipulate me into believing I hadn't invited them. My relatives have now decided they don't want to attend my sister's wedding. They don't want to have anything to do with my parents. The cousin who told my sister all of this had been hearing her vent about it for a while. This girl is quite the gossip, so I'm not surprised she decided to pass that information on to my sister and parents. I'm pretty sure she just wants to see how the drama unfolds, and she's lucky because my parents are furious. They think I sabotaged everything on purpose. They also think I'm jealous of my sister, so they believe I spread these rumors to make them look like the bad guys. They said my husband made up the whole incident and that none of it happened. They even accused me of purposely not inviting them to have an excuse to gain sympathy from the relatives and make them look like villains. I disagree with all of that. I'm pretty sure my husband told me the truth, and I'm also sure I definitely sent them the invitations. What does make me feel a bit weird is the fact that because of what I told my relatives, they're now choosing not to attend my sister's wedding. That was never my intention. So, am I the bad one for telling my entire family the reason my parents didn't come to my wedding? Edit. There are several reasons why my sister and I don't get along and never have. The biggest one is that she's always trying to put me down. It's not enough for her that our parents already prefer her over me. She needs to make sure I'm constantly aware of it. I really don't know what her problem is, but since our childhood, she has always tried to rub things in my face. It's not like I didn't know she was much more successful than me when we were kids. She was always among the top in her class, good at sports, and quite popular. That should have been enough for her, but for some reason she went out of her way to make me feel bad with her sarcastic comments, digs, and the like. She even had her little group of friends, who were younger than me, and they tried to bully me every single day. The only reason I never made a big fuss was because I didn't think they were important enough to address. At worst, they were just a minor annoyance to me. I found them irritating, but I didn't care much about them. As for my sister, I really thought she'd eventually outgrow this stupid habit, but she didn't. She kept behaving the same way, making jokes about me, throwing shade and so on even as an adult. It got to the point where I literally stopped attending places because of her. I don't want to create drama. I'm someone who avoids confrontations and doesn't enjoy interacting with people I don't like. I simply try to stay away from them entirely. So, in recent years, I've only attended family events when absolutely necessary. At smaller gatherings, I usually avoid them altogether because I don't want to see my sister. So, yes, that's why I don't get along with her, and I have no regrets about it. It's not like I didn't try to get along with her when we were kids, I really did. But at some point, you just realize that this isn't the kind of person you want in your life. That's the kind of awakening I had a few years ago about my sister, and then again recently about my parents. The only reason I kept these relationships for so long, despite the pain they had already caused me, was because they were all I had as family. Sure, I have my relatives, but it's not the same. However, now I really believe that my relatives are probably more of a family to me than these people ever have been. Update 1. I started ignoring my parents after reading the comments here. I realized that telling the truth to the rest of my family wasn't as bad as they were making it out to be. I simply shared my side of things, and I don't have to feel bad about it. When they kept messaging me non-stop, I decided to respond and tell them the same. That's when they started arguing with me, accusing me of doing all this on purpose, wanting to ruin their image in front of the rest of the family just because I've always been jealous of my sister. We were talking on the phone before answering. I had already decided in my head that this time, I was going to let it all out because I really needed to vent. As soon as they accused me of being jealous of my sister, I simply agreed. I told them that, in fact, I was jealous of her, but not for the reasons they thought. I wasn't jealous because she was more successful than me, or because she was more attractive by conventional standards. I was always jealous because, instead of being fair, they always preferred her over me. I could understand that the rest of the world would choose her over me for the reasons I mentioned, but my own parents? I was tired of pretending it didn't matter to me. Things like this affect people, and expecting it not to affect me, to simply ignore it and pretend I was always fine, is completely unreasonable. But I did it because I always hoped that at some point my parents would start to value me for who I am. That never happened. Even when I didn't do it consciously, I still unconsciously hoped they would value me somehow. That's why I kept my mouth shut about their terrible treatment of me for so many years. But now that I was finally speaking out, they had a problem with it, just because it made them look bad. Well, too bad. If they think the truth makes them look bad, then maybe they're the problem, not me. If they wanted to look like good parents, maybe they should have been good parents, and then I'd only have wonderful things to say about them, but they gave me this ammunition themselves. So now they don't have the right to complain that I'm making them look bad. If I want to tell my relatives how my parents treated me, how they always chose my sister over me, and make it a big topic, then I absolutely will. Instead of calling me over and over to try and get me to change my story, maybe they should try talking to my relatives and convincing them that they aren't the type of people I made them out to be. Maybe that would be a more productive use of their time. Talking to me won't get them anywhere because I've already said what I needed to say. If my relatives have decided to believe me, then good for me. The bottom line is that I'm not going to fix the situation for them. I'm not responsible for anyone else's reputation but my own. My parents fell silent, probably because they're not used to this kind of behavior from me. As I mentioned, I'm someone who avoids confrontations and is quite quiet and introverted, so an outburst like this wasn't something they expected. They probably thought I was going to let this go too, but I was tired of being walked all over in the hope that maybe, someday, they'd value me. After a few seconds, my parents told me that since I had already decided they were terrible parents, and had such strong opinions about their failure to raise me the same way they raised my sister, they had decided it was time to let me go, to separate our paths. So far, they had hoped I'd fix the situation because they thought I was family, that I was their daughter, and that I would at least care. But now, it was clear to them that I was happy they were suffering. They told me they no longer had any expectations of me, and that I was free to live my life however I wanted. They wouldn't bother me anymore. They ended their little speech by saying that, at the end of the day, we were both their daughters. Maybe I just felt they had always preferred my sister over me because I was the insecure one. According to them, that wasn't their fault, and I shouldn't blame them for it. Even at the end, they couldn't accept that part of this was their fault. They wanted me to be the villain. It took a lot of effort to keep my mouth shut, but I didn't say anything because I knew it was pointless with them, and there was no use in continuing the argument. I didn't want to end up talking in circles. If they wanted to make me the bad guy, that was fine by me. At least it would keep them away from me. Now that I've made my point clear and told them how I felt all these years, I feel much lighter and better. Whatever happens with my sister's wedding or anything else is their problem, not mine. I'm just going to focus on my own life. Update 2. A few days ago, I had that conversation with my parents. Today, my sister wrote to me and sent me a message saying that what I had said to our parents was very wrong and that they were very upset about it. She went on to say that they had raised me, done everything for me as parents, and that I couldn't just turn my back on them and say they hadn't been good enough because, according to her, that was very ungrateful of me. She was acting as if she were the most righteous and virtuous person, pretending to be the example of grace and dignity when she is none of that. I knew she was enjoying this opportunity to feel superior to me. It upset me a lot, so I didn't even bother to respond to her message. I just blocked her. I thought that would be the end of it. But a couple of hours later, my husband called me to say he had received a message from an unknown number. Sure enough, it was my sister. In her message, she basically told him the same thing she had told me. Then she had the audacity to tell him that he needed to convince me to apologize to our parents because what I was doing was really wrong. She even added that now that he is part of the family, he couldn't just stand by as a spectator and let these things happen, especially when, in her words, it made me look like a complete fool. I was furious that she had the nerve to write to my husband, but he found it absolutely hilarious. He thought it was funny that my family actually believed writing to him to ask him to convince me to apologize would work. Thanks to him, I was also able to find it amusing and let it go. Otherwise, I might really have lashed out at her. In the past few days, I haven't told anyone what's happening with my parents. I haven't had the time to talk to most people because I've been busy with work. However, if someone asks me or if I run into someone, I'm going to be very open about it. I'm sure that's what bothers my parents the most. I'm not usually one to gossip, but if this is making my parents unhappy, then I'm completely on board with it. The best part is that it's not even gossip. I'm just telling my version of things. I don't even have to make anything up. I just have to tell people how my parents have really behaved. That's enough for people not to sympathize with them. The funniest part of all this is that, even though my parents already know I'm not going to stay quiet anymore or protect the family's reputation by keeping silent, they still do everything possible to make things worse with tricks like this. Update 3. It's been a couple of weeks since my last update, and my parents have started telling everyone in the family that I've been spreading false rumors about them to make them look bad. According to them, I've been doing this just because I'm jealous of my sister and can't stand the idea of people actually attending her wedding, since it's going to be much bigger and more extravagant than mine. I'm pretty sure they thought this strategy would work, painting me as the villain in the story and all, but most of the family members had already decided they wanted to take my side. To be honest, I didn't even have to try. Many of them already felt that my parents spoiled my sister too much, even when we were kids. So my version of events was much more believable to them than any narrative my parents tried to impose. Besides, what kind of parents don't receive an invitation to their daughter's wedding and don't ask about it? It's clear to everyone that the invitation was sent, and that was just an excuse by my parents. Many family members have pointed this out to them, and I didn't even have to say anything. Instead of simply believing my parents, several relatives came to me and told me what my parents had been saying behind my back, and, well, their whole plan completely backfired. Now people laugh at them and their stupidity, along with me. This is karma at its finest, and I'm really glad they chose to show their true colors to everyone. It's been quite satisfying to see them face the consequences of their actions. Update 4. My sister's wedding has already taken place, but since practically no one we know attended, I can't give you details. What I can tell you is that an uncle of mine decided to host a barbecue that day, and most of the family gathered there. Having a family event where my parents and sister didn't attend has been one of the most interesting experiences. I hope there are many more gatherings like this in the future because it felt so good. No drama, no arguments, none of that nonsense. Just a family eating, having fun and enjoying life. Although I didn't attend my sister's wedding, or know much about what happened there, I can guess what went down. The posts throwing shade at me and the rest of the family don't speak to it being a good party. Quite the opposite, in fact. When I got married, even though some people didn't attend my wedding, I didn't post anything about it. I just enjoyed the moment. If you feel the need to talk badly about other family members indirectly, accusing people of skipping the wedding to attend a simple gathering, then it's clearly bothering you. But so far, no one has reacted to those posts, and it's fine if it stays that way. At least in my experience, the best thing to do is not to keep feeding this problem. Update 5. Yesterday was Thanksgiving, and my parents were invited to a relative's house who decided to host everyone this year. But instead, they decided not to attend. They said they already had plans to spend the day with their real family, meaning my sister and her husband. This relative told them that was fine, but that they shouldn't expect more invitations in the future. To which my parents responded that they didn't expect any either. Does that mean I won't have to see them at Christmas either? I don't know.